Sierra Games. They're a company that sort of exists these days, aren't they? Now you folks may know them as one of the most influential game companies in existence, what with them popularizing the point-and-click adventure games back in the 80s and 90s and all. But before I figured that out, in my youth, I knew them as the publishers for Ice Age 2 The Meltdown the video game, and nothing else. I did mention before on this show that I was a pretty dumb kid, didn't I? Anyway, over the years, I eventually did figure out who they had been. A bunch of cool guys who wanted to make games about utter jackasses. They brought out such classics like Mystery House, Gold Rush, The Colonial's Bequest, Phantasmagoria, King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest, Quest for... Yep, they certainly love sending players on various kinds of quests, even if such quests involve idiots doing incredibly dumb stuff that somehow result in them being the hero. However, Sierra is no stranger to games controversy, but not with any of the stuff just mentioned. It is true that many of their classic game death sequences were pushing it at the time. I mean, just look at Space Quest 3. One wrong move and bam, bleed to death. Bam, battered corpse. Bam, splattered corpse. Bam, lava victim. Bam, zero pressure disembowelment. Who knew that intestines were cyan all this time? But when it comes to controversy involving Sierra properties, there's only one series that truly fits the bill. Today's game is Leisure Suit Larry, and it caused a super sexy controversy. Who would have known that the most amount of controversy Sierra could have caused at the time would be through its most provocative series, rather than its most violent series? I guess Congress had bigger fish to fry then. Anyway, this cult series was the result of former high school teacher, Al Lowe, getting tired of programming kids games and wanting to step it up a notch. Essentially a reworking of the text-only soft porn adventure, Leisure Suit Larry has you in the role of Larry Laffer, a middle-aged man looking to lose his virginity in the vast, vacant, and voracious city of Lost Wages. I do wonder where they got that name from. No one's gonna understand that, you dummy. Just move on. The game was filled with quite a bit of suggested content, but as per usual with Sierra, it was mostly played out for laughs. Practically any game with the goal being, get laid, you bum, pretty much has to, wouldn't you agree? Still, it was the late 80s, and the public had yet to adjust to this newfangled entertainment whatchamacallit. So given the right circumstances, controversy was sure to spark in this situation, right? Well, yes. Kind of. Unsure of how well the game was going to sell, Sierra did virtually no advertising and marketing for it, and many of the stores they had sent the game to in order for them to stock it had refused to do so. One in particular returned a sample disc of the game that had been given to them beforehand, sawed in half. Even some people on the Sierra team refused to do any work on the game during its development, one customer support person quitting outright. But I mean, who wouldn't want to quit that job anyway? As such, the game's sales were initially dire, only selling about 4,000 copies in its first month. However, word of mouth spread quickly, and the game became quite successful by the end of the year, selling 250,000 copies. Turns out a lot of stores were selling the game, they just didn't have the balls to admit it. In no time, Leisure Suit Larry had gained a popular status among Sierra fans, though it also gained a popular status among detractors. Thankfully, there weren't any governmental dickheads who intervened with the game, just regular dickheads. According to a really interesting article written by then marketing director John Williams, this wasn't in the original recording and I didn't pay close attention to who wrote the article, and I don't feel like re-recording the whole segment to make this all flow really well, so sorry. For Computer Gaming World back in '88, he had received quite a bit of hate mail about the game. Not much of it was displayed in the magazine, but what was displayed was, top cack mate, the dankest available. I will not do any business with any company that would give a job to someone like you. Please drop that puerile, obviously immature slimeball John Williams into a greasy brown wrapper and drop it in the nearest trash compactor. I read with regret in your recent newsletter that you intend to go into the porno software business. The glorification of loose moral behavior has caused a rise in social disease and divorce and a general decline in the quality of American society. There are also the typical angry parents, and even the mention of some game reviewers questioning the game's content within the reviews. This kind of response isn't unusual for media that breaks the boundaries, but while it isn't anything special, it's still hilarious to go through. However, my favorite section has to be the discussion of an MPAA-style rating system for video games, and how one of Mr. Williams' colleagues said, "It's not an issue the government would spend any time with." So funny, so funny. And in regards to the content of the games, there really isn't a whole lot to show. Of the 3 versions available, the 1987 EGA one, the 1991 VGA one, and the 2013 remake, you don't get a whole lot of nudity or sexual content. Most of that is humorously blackbarred or relegated to text, and even when you do see some nudity, it's nothing to write home about. You see some boobs, Larry's ass, more boobs, meh. Looking at this controversy, it's clearly a product of the time. Not many games like Leisure Suit Larry had hit the mainstream market as of yet, so seeing people react to it this way is certainly reasonable. The fact that it wasn't an even bigger fiasco than what it was is remarkable given some of the other controversial games at the time, but introducing people to something like this was probably for the best. It didn't stop future games from getting similar flack, but it was necessary to get people into that mindset, as you'll see why later in the video. Since then, the series saw even more success, spanning 5 sequels and an ever-increasing fanbase. Unfortunately, the success hit a bit of a snag in the late 90s, when a string of incidents including accounting fraud, multiple layoffs, and a major restructuring reduced Sierra in size rather significantly. By the beginning of the new millennium, the company were now a mere publisher under Vivendi Universal. It's quite the story, though probably not one I'll cover on this show because who the hell wants to learn about revenue inflation? More than I imagined probably, but I'll leave it to Larry Bundy Jr. to deal with that and his inevitable 5 companies that got screwed over fact hunt video. Oh come on, you know what's gonna happen at this rate. Despite this, Leisure Suit Larry wasn't quite done with causing controversy just yet. Even though they're now just a publisher, Sierra still held the rights to the games, and in 2004 teamed up with High Voltage Software, they made this stuff but who cares, to make a new entry in the series, Leisure Suit Larry Magna Cum Laude, and I want to smack whoever came up with that title. Unfortunately, the game was a significant departure from the adventure-style format the previous games were known for, and instead took on a more generic open-world game. Though, seeing as it had no involvement from the original creators, that's not much of a surprise. What also isn't a bit of a surprise is the spike in controversial content. Given the circumstances and the series' past, especially with the previous game, going 3D was almost a guarantee for controversy. You're still going around wooing the ladies, and this time things get a hell of a lot more explicit. As such, there are 2 versions of the game, an edited one and an unedited one, the latter of which received the highly touted AO rating from the ESRB. How ironic. With the edited version, you get your tits, but not much else, and with the unedited version, you get the whole package. Though to be honest, you don't see much more than stuff you'd see in something like Game of Thrones. So with all this content, what kind of controversies did we get from this thing? Well, actually not a whole lot. Sure, you could see your areolas and pubic hair all you want now, but it seemed that no one cared. Well, except for Australia, of course. They banned both versions of the game, but that's a given for those pricks. There was a funny thing about the edited versions of the game, though. With a hack on the PC or action replay with the consoles, you could remove the black bars that cut out the lower body nudity. It's notable, sure, but there was hardly any controversy over it. Unlike another game with similar controversial content that I'll be discussing someday. I guess the most surprising thing about the game's controversy is that there wasn't any controversy. Or at least not much controversy. But what also isn't surprising is that, ultimately, the game isn't very good. Wooing the ladies in this game amounts to these boring timing-based minigames that look far too annoying to get through in order to get to the goods. It's also not as funny or clever as the old games too, and we're not even playing as Larry anymore, just his nephew, which is basically Larry 2.0. It's quite the downgrade from the previous games, and even Mr. Lowe wasn't pleased with it, bashing the game quite vigorously on his personal website. I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, you could do worse. Like with the next game after that, Leisure Suit Larry box office bust. That game actually didn't cause any controversy at all. Well, unless you count the fact that the game was an amalgamation of various anal fluids as being controversial. I don't know though, it doesn't look too bad. Hell, maybe we got a bit of a hidden oh god, what the fuck is that? Back away from this establishment to the hellscape that you once occupied! Jesus, these guys are publishing ukulele now? Oh dear. So while magna cum laude isn't of any note overall, it and its tiny controversy are good at displaying the changing attitudes towards sex in games. These days you can pretty much show anything in games, well, as long as it's not full-on hardcore porn. Although who knows, maybe that'll get broken down one day too. In fact, it seems a lot of tropes reserved for more restrictable media seem to be cropping up a lot these days. Who knows where we'll be with that 20 years from now? Actually, we might not know that because we'll all be dead by then thanks to President Trump. Now, there is one thing I feel obligated to touch on. We may live in an age where we see more boob sticks and vagoos, as well as more blood, guts, and vagoos, but that doesn't stop people from criticizing it. So let's bring up the obvious question about Leisure Suit Larry, a series where pathetic dudes try to bang hot chicks. Are these games sexist? Oh jeez, do I really have to do this? Oh, fine, whatever. I'll say that on a surface level, one could argue that these games are sexish. Most of the men are self-entitled, annoying, occasionally questionably stereotyped dumbasses, and the women here aren't really much better, playing off prostitute roles, gold digger roles, sex-craving lunatic roles, among various other uninteresting tropes. There's also the obvious juxtaposition between the cartoonishly drawn men and the realistically drawn women, especially in Magna Cum Laude and the remake of the first game. However, looking at this from another angle, this stuff really doesn't matter at all. As I said, a lot of it is played off for laughs, and the game is most definitely aware of how big of an asshole these characters can be. True, Magna Cum Laude does this with a lot more vulgarity than with the previous games, which are much more subtle, but it still wants you to laugh at these pathetic jackals, rather than think, this is the ideal human. You may not like it, but this is what you should be doing for a living, so go to a bar and do exactly what this game tells you to do. No exceptions or else you won't get enough shit kicked out of you. To be fair, doing this to mask the apparent sexish content is risky because everyone has their own taste in humor, and not everyone will find these games funny. Still, there are a lot of better games that tackle the sexish topic than with this, though ultimately, as you may know, I don't care for the topic very much and just thought I'd stick in my input a little bit. Like a child sticking a fork into an electrical socket. And that's it for Leisure Suit Larry, a series with a lot of steamy content, unfortunately lacking in steamy controversy. But hey, any chance I get to use obscure pop music in these videos is always fun. And you know what, now people know that if they ever want to take a crack at a similar game, they're sure to not cause a big stink. And if anyone else tells them otherwise, screw them. Or better yet, milk that for publicity. That's honestly the only way to get anywhere these days. That'll do for now, folks, so I'll see you in the next shitfest. Play us out, Junior!
And Mama used to say, take your time.